Jabberwocky by Drakenator. Read for you by Ashanimus. Summary. The previous Golden Guard lives, and then he dies. Content warning. This story contains realistic and fantastical depictions of and discussions of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, mental, physical, and religious abuse, dissociation, murder, blood and injury, emotional manipulation, cognitive dissonance, child death, and suicide. Reader and listener discretion is advised. Chapter 1. Jasper sat alone in his bedroom, humming and kicking his legs beneath his chair as he slipped a needle in and out of the fabric of his project. Hand sewing was very careful work, and he enjoyed the tactile nature of it. It felt nice to make things. It felt like a profound act to bring something into existence, to change reality by altering a thing's state of being, wood to carving, fabric to stuffed toy. He found it grounding, something to solidify that he was real, that he was alive, that he'd lived. He tied off the thread and then cut it with his teeth, setting the needle aside on his desk. He held up his finished work, a little plush red frog with big eyes and a dopey grin. "Hey there, Sprig," he smiled. The Golden Guard tilted his head towards the open doors of the throne room as he heard the rapid tap-tap-tap of many approaching footsteps. He watched impassively as a pale blue caterpillar woman skittered into the room and sat up on her hind four legs, clasping the top four together while she huffed and puffed as if she'd run the entire way here. "Your Eminence! Your Eminence!" she cried, smoothing her hair back hurriedly. "Yes, Lazulas," the Emperor said in a terse voice. The Golden Guard wondered how much longer she'd keep her job with the way she clearly grated on the Emperor's nerves. He certainly wouldn't miss her. "Lilith Clawthorne has returned," she announced with a bow. The Emperor's mood changed immediately. "Ah, yes. Where is she?" "In the dungeon, sir," Lazarus answered. "She's signing in the new prisoners now." The Emperor rose from his throne. "Excellent. Tell her to wait there for me." "Yes, Your Eminence, right away," the demon gasped. She turned sharply away and dropped back onto all 8 feet to sprint down the corridor. The Golden Guard followed the Emperor in silence at a tight heel as he left the throne room at a far more leisurely pace in the direction of the dungeon. "Jasper," said the Emperor as they walked down a long, empty hallway. "Yes, sir?" the Golden Guard asked. "What do you think of Miss Clawthorne?" "She's ruthlessly ambitious, sir, and unwaveringly dedicated to her work," he replied, then hesitated, "outside of how it pertains to her sister." "Do you believe her relationship with her wild witch relative compromises her position in the coven?" "Permission to speak freely?" the Golden Guard asked. "Yes. I'd like your unfiltered opinion." "Honestly, I'm not sure," Jasper admitted. "I don't really know her all that well. She's so standoffish and like, she's cold, you know? Guarded. I don't think I've seen enough of her to really know where her loyalties lie when it's do or die." Bellows hummed in thought for a long moment. "I've been considering replacing Astereth with her." "You've been considering her for head witch of the Emperor's Coven?" Jasper balked. "Really?" "She's very powerful. She frightens people." "Is that why you let her keep her talisman?" Bellows stopped short and turned to look at him, blue eyes glowing through his mask. The Golden Guard froze and stood up straight. "Do not question my decisions," the Emperor said with a low growl. The Golden Guard ducked his head. "I apologize for speaking out of turn, sir." The Emperor stared down at him a little longer before he resumed walking. "Yes," he replied finally, "among other reasons. I've been carefully managing the information she's been given about the state of the Boiling Isles and the Coven, grooming her towards the position of figurehead for some time. She cuts an imposing figure, but she's not particularly perceptive, which is what I would prefer for someone in my immediate circle." He paused before adding, Besides you, of course. Jasper's heart swelled in his chest, and he couldn't stop himself from smiling behind his mask. Thank you, sir. I'm honored by your trust. Blood is the only bond that can be trusted in this world, Bellows commented. I know that you would never betray me, Jasper. And you know I would never betray you. I know, Jasper said reverently. I'll always be loyal to you. I'd like you to test her, the Emperor said, raising his chin as they neared the dungeon. Take her out on a mission of your choosing. Find where her loyalties lie. Yes, Emperor Bellows, the Golden Guard replied. Jasper twirled his staff and then slid his foot back, resetting his stance. He grinned and held out his free hand, gesturing, Come at me. He watched as Darius set his jaw and narrowed his eyes. Good. He wanted to see him focused. Darius was always at his best when he was focused. A spike of abomination matter shot towards him, but he skipped sideways and out of range easily. He was too experienced while dodging something similar to ever be worried about getting hit on accident again. For good measure, he crossed his arm behind his back, holding his staff two-handed. Ha, come on, I told you not to hold back, Jasper giggled. Look, I'll make it fair. I won't even use magic. Jasper! Darius snapped. He was getting under his skin. Also good, he knew how to focus. He needed to learn how to stay focused. Jasper whistled through his teeth as he danced out of the way of a series of purple spikes that shot up from the training field. Knock me over and we're done! Come on, kid, I know you can do it. Darius growled in frustration and threw up both arms, summoning a wave of abomination matter that surged towards him. He tossed his staff in the air and did a backflip, hand springing off the ground and over the wave as it crashed down below him. He grabbed his staff as he landed and spun back around on a heel to offer his apprentice a smug grin. Titan, damn it, stop moving! Darius yelled. He lost all finesse and simply began lobbing cannonballs of abomination matter at him en masse. Jasper sighed. He'd been hoping he'd last longer before he'd let his temper get to him, but he was working on it. One way or another, Darius was going to learn to be patient. He gave his staff a rapid two-hand spin that knocked the oncoming missiles out of the way before he flash-stepped behind his apprentice and swept his legs out from beneath him. Darius hit the ground with an oof. Jasper giggled and tapped his staff against the ground. Nothing personal, kid. I thought you weren't going to use magic, Darius grumbled as he pushed himself back up. And stop calling me that! Jasper laughed. Anyway, never trust your enemy. Ugh. Jasper picked up his staff to give him a playful tap on the head. Darius waved his hands wildly in the air to dismiss him before he stood up and glared at his mentor. Come on. If you could learn how to keep your cool, you could get me. I'm a physical fighter, remember. Keep me moving, don't let me stop. I'm always going to get gassed before you do. All you have to do is outlast me without getting pissed off first. Well, you are very good at pissing me off, Darius snapped. Jasper booped him on the nose with a laugh. Yeah. Darius waved his hand away again with a scowl, but Jasper just bounced on his heels. Okay, well, do you know what time it is? Jasper inquired. Darius sighed. What time is it? It's... Jasper cheered before he twirled his staff above his head and summoned a great wave of abomination matter. Darius squeaked in alarm as it crashed down over them, and when it receded, they were in one of his many favorite spots on the castle roof. He gave it another quick spin and summoned up a blanket and a basket of food with a grand flourish that he finished with enthusiastic jazz hands. Lunchtime! Can you please warn me before you translocate me? Darius groaned as he wobbled slightly. Jasper laughed at him and plopped down on his butt. Check it out. I've got eyeball coleslaw for you and hard-boiled griffin eggs for me. I asked Miss Basu in the kitchens to put that fancy truffle sauce you like on yours and everything. Darius eyed the basket dubiously before his hunger clearly overwhelmed his annoyance and he sat down beside him with a sigh, holding out his hand. Jasper tapped his feet against the shingles happily and handed him his lunch. You really should expand your palate, Darius commented. I feel like you exclusively eat, 4 foods? I like them, Jasper said defensively. What's wrong with griffin eggs? They're so... plain? I like plain, Jasper scoffed, cracking the shell between his hands as he began to peel it off. Plain is simple and tasty. Everything you like tastes like butt. That's so juvenile. No, this is juvenile, Jasper grinned before he stuck his tongue out at him and blew a raspberry. Darius rolled his eyes. The Golden Guard walked briskly through the castle halls with his head up and chin down, peering at those he passed through the dark visor as they eyed him back nervously. They became fewer and further between as he approached the Emperor's private wing, until suddenly, he was alone. He stopped when he saw an open passageway where there was usually a wall between his room and the Emperor's. It led into an unlit darkness, straight down a set of cobbled stairs. He cast a glance back and forth down the hall, and then he stepped inside, tightening his grip on his staff. The wall closed behind him, but he kept walking. When he emerged from the stairwell, it was into a room that no witch was ever meant to see. Around the walls of the chamber were huge planters filled with red soil, and in the center stood a table stacked with books and tools and material spell components. On another table by the wall, the remainder of an old skeleton lay collecting dust. There were old bloodstains on the stone floor and a dankness to the room that made it reek of fertilizer and death. Bellows stood by one of the planters and raised his head at him, narrowing his eyes. "You left the door open," said the Golden Guard. Bellows said sharply, looking down at the potting box. "I told you to be along quickly." "I apologize for making you wait." "I expect better of you," he said with a dangerous edge to his voice. "I've no time to manage its vitals today. I must unfortunately meet with the Coven heads on pressing matters. I need you to take care of this for me." "Of course." The Emperor waved a hand in the direction of the table. "You know where everything is?" The Golden Guard nodded. "I do. Would you like me to meet you in the throne room when I'm finished?" The Emperor considered it. "Yes," he said eventually. "But don't rush. This is far more important." "I know." The Emperor set a hand on his shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze as he passed. He disappeared back into the dark stairwell. Jasper took off his mask and set it on the center table, picking up the soil acidity monitor from where it lay behind the book on magical constructs. He approached the box that Bellows had been standing in front of and slid the thin metal rod into the dirt before taking it out with a hum as he inspected the readout. He returned to the center table and the open journal documenting the current in-progress Grimwalker's development. He picked up a watering can from the floor and returned to the box, looking into it fondly. Below the surface, he knew that a little life was growing. Jasper tipped the watering can forward over the box and its precious contents. "Hey there, Hunter," he smiled. Chapter 2. The Golden Guard sat silently amongst the rafters as Lilith Clawthorne walked purposefully through the corridor below him, her eyes forward and her staff in hand, as it always was. She may have been allowed to keep her talisman, but even she seemed to be perceptive enough to realize that it was a privilege she would do well not to push her luck on. He very rarely saw the little bird in any other form but this, and that was exactly how it should be. Wild magic didn't have a place in the castle. Well, wild magic outside of the Emperor's tight grasp anyway. He smiled to himself at the thought. Unlike her little talisman, he belonged here. She turned a corner and he vanished in a red flash, appearing in the rafters of the next corridor with his legs crossed over a wooden beam. He tilted his head down at her, lost in thought. He didn't know her very well. Well, he didn't know her, but he knew everything about her. She was hardly the only person in the castle that he made a habit of shadowing, though. He memorized the routines, schedules, combat abilities, and motivations of anyone who had access to the Emperor's inner chambers. They may not know about the Day of Unity or the truth of the Titan, but they knew the Emperor had power, and people who wanted power would try to take it from those who had it. It was the Golden Guard's job to protect the Emperor, and had been his job and all those that had come before him, and he had no intention of letting his lineage down. Not when it was so important. So he followed, he watched, he listened, he remembered. And he wasn't surprised when Lilith entered the library and headed straight for the restricted section, like she always did. He narrowed his eyes behind his mask and followed her inside, teleporting from the rafters and into a shadowy alcove where he could see her between the rows of bookcases as she walked. He watched her dismiss and recast the ward spell on the iron door and gave his staff a twirl, casting an illusion spell to disguise himself from being seen or heard. He passed through the ward without issue and crossed his arms behind his back as he followed in her footsteps. He noted with some amusement the way she occasionally glanced around, only to smile smugly to herself as if she were proud she had not been caught. She selected a book from the shelf of tomes that predated the Savage Ages, books of wild and dangerous magic that had been locked away for very good reasons. He narrowed his eyes as she sat down on the floor, letting her staff turn back into a raven whose caw she shushed before she drew up her knees to her chest and opened the old book. He put his staff under his arm and held up both hands in front of himself, index finger and thumb out as if he imagined a camera and composed the shot in his head. Then he flash-stepped on top of the bookcase in front of her and carefully arranged his posture, one leg crooked with his elbow resting on it and his cheek in his hand over his mask, the other leg dangling coolly below him, staff cast across his lap. With a snap, he dismissed the illusion. "Well, well, well," he hummed curiously and watched with delight as she snapped her head up and skittered backward in alarm like a child caught cheating on an exam. "What are we reading today, kid?" "Golden Guard!" she cried as she scrambled to her feet, waving at her raven to transform. It is so unexpected to see you here. I was just researching your sister's curse. Yeah. Jasper hand-waved with a yawn. "You really aren't as slick as you think you are, Lilith." Her face became impossibly paler. She tightened her grip on her staff. She could be an invaluable asset to the Emperor. If only she... "Yup," Jasper agreed. He shoved himself off the bookcase and dropped to the floor with a thump, stepping forward and bending down to look at her sideways through his visor. "Oh, trust me, I don't disagree. The Owl Lady is a powerful witch, and it's a real shame she's chosen to align herself with sin and chaos." Yes, it is," Lilith agreed cautiously. "Let's go get her then," he said, smiling behind his mask. "What?" "Let's go get her," Jasper repeated. "You and me in an outfit of Coven Scouts. Let's go pick her up. Bring her back here. You want to help her, don't you?" "Yes, but..." "Oh?" Jasper asked innocently. "Do you not think our Emperor could help her?" "I didn't say that." "Then," he hummed as he stood up straight, "you don't want her to be running around free, do you, Lilith?" "No!" Lilith cried, and a fire returned to her eyes, no longer afraid of him, but standing up straight and stepping forward in a challenge. "How dare you question my loyalty?" she hissed. He'd be wagging his tail if he had one. That was what he wanted to see. "Oh," he cooed. "I made you mad." "What is it you want, Golden Guard?" she demanded. "State your business or take your leave." He drew away with a cute little twirl, turning back to look at her over his shoulder. "Put together an outfit, kiddo. We're going owl hunting." "Under my new recruitment program, Coven membership is up 10% this year," Asterith droned down. "Meanwhile, Plant Coven membership is down 12% and..." "Oh, blah, blah, blah," Tara snapped. "Your membership might be up, but that's only because your standards are down, old man." "Tara," sighed Hetty wearily. "Don't get him started," added Tyrion with a scowl that pulled his wrinkles tight across his gaunt face. "Asterith wouldn't know talent if it bit him on the ass." "Says the old man who can't keep his own deputy from going rogue," Asterith snapped. "Oh, please, Nim was seduced," Tara groaned. "None of us knew he was going to wander off and join a bunch of forest hippie rebels. You can blame Tyrion for quite a few things, but not Nim." "I can blame him for whatever I want. I'll especially blame him for putting the Abomination Coven in such a dire position," Asterith spat. "You know how inconvenient it will be when you die? We're going to have to vet your replacement. I do actually do things at my job, you know." "I'm reviewing replacements." "Not fast enough." Jasper cleared his throat from where he stood behind the Emperor. 10 sets of eyes turned towards him. "My apprentice is an abomination specialist," he said, and he hoped his voice sounded appropriately professional. He was much better at this when he didn't speak. "Oh?" asked Abomination's coven head witch Tyrion Murex. "You have an apprentice?" asked Tara, raising an eyebrow. He nodded. Asterith hummed. Darius Demon? Daemon? Darius Daemon, Jasper corrected. The one that perfected translocation? Oh, Asterith bubbled, eyes lighting up. Yes, I remember him now. Right one, that lad. I shortlisted his application, Tyrion commented. Do you think he's qualified, Golden Guard? Jasper nodded. Tyrion turned back to Asterith with a smug smile. Well, it seems as though the matter of my replacement is resolved, old boy. He leaned forward against the table with his fangs bared. Where's your deputy, Aster? The head witch of the Emperor's Coven narrowed his eyes at him dangerously, but Jasper was far too busy cheering internally. He was glad he was in a mask and cloak so no one could see the dopey smile on his face or the way he was flapping his hands at his sides. He didn't listen to the rest of the meeting. Too busy being distracted by his own pride, and when the Emperor called an end and the head witches began to file from the room, he foolishly thought that his shift had ended, as it originally had been meant to. The Emperor's staff collided with his gut as he stepped forward and pushed him back. No, Bellows growled. You stay. The Golden Guard nodded and stepped back, waiting in silence until they were alone. The Emperor lowered his staff. Approach me. The Golden Guard walked around the throne and knelt in front of him. Head tipped forward to expose the back of his neck. I've spoken out of turn. You participated in sowing further discourse between the Coven heads. I know. If you want to engage in such trivialities, do it out of my presence. Bellows spat. You know the role I must fulfill of the benevolent Emperor. You know I cannot falter. You know I cannot lose their trust. You hurt my image again by encouraging them, Jasper. I know, Master. The Golden Guard choked, guilt closing around his throat like a wire. The stakes are too high. I know. You mustn't forget the greater picture, the Emperor reminded him as he rose to his feet. You mustn't forget our mission. Nothing else matters. Nothing else matters, the Golden Guard repeated in a hoarse whisper. He took a shaky inhale and clenched his free hand into a fist. Please, Master. I know you must remind me. I hate having to, Jasper. You know how important you are to me. I can't do this without you. I know, Jasper warbled. His eyes burned. I'm ready. There was a long beat of silence as he waited. And then the Emperor's staff slammed into his skull and drove it into the stone floor with a sickening crack that he knew meant he was going to be seeing Hetty Cutburn again sooner than he would the rest of the Coven heads. But the old talisman wasn't interested in gifts or compliments. So when the pompous king brought out his piles of golden jewels, the old talisman simply turned up his beak and flew away, leaving the king in front of his subjects, more embarrassed than he'd ever been in his entire spoiled life. Jasper flipped to the next page of the storybook, sitting on his crossed legs, and he took a breath, looking over into the planter with a smile. I know you're not ready yet, he sighed. And I know Bellows says you're not alive yet either, but he glanced around at the empty room and leaned forward, cupping a hand around his face and dropping his voice to a whisper. But I think he's wrong. I don't remember being a little sprig, but I have a feeling. Bellows says not to trust feelings, especially since mine aren't real. But I figure maybe even if it's not really a real feeling, it's just my subconscious trying to tell me something I know, but don't know I know. Hunter, of course, said nothing, because he was a jumble of spell components growing beneath the surface of the soil. Jasper laughed at himself. He was talking to dirt. He knew it was silly. He said quietly, playing with the corner of the storybook page. I really hope I get to meet you. I know that I probably won't, but... He smiled softly to himself. I hope I do. I already like you. I hope hope you like me too. Chapter 3. Tyrion, said the Golden Guard with a curt nod, allow me to introduce my apprentice, Darius Damone. Hummed the old man gruffly. Good to meet you, lad. I hear impressive things about you. I'm glad to hear it, Darius replied coolly. I aim to impress. Tyrion huffed a laugh. So you're up for Deputy Coven Witch, eh? Yes, sir, said Darius. I'm more than qualified for the position. I would be a great asset to my coven and to the Emperor. Tyrion barked with laughter. Spirited. I like you. Well, the Golden Guard's recommendation is good enough for me. I expect to see you ready from work on Monday, 8 o'clock sharp. See you then, laddie! He turned and proceeded down the hall. Darius and Jasper were silent until he'd turned a far corner. Jasper immediately whistled up a barred magic dome of silence and squealed like a child. Eee! You got it! Darius apparently could not bring himself to summon up his usual veneer of sour disinterest. He beamed like a schoolchild and squealed with him as he grabbed his hands and spun around in wild, unhindered joy. He was Deputy Witch of the Abominations Coven, and Jasper had helped him get there. Take that, Blight, Jasper thought bitterly. Who's got no future now, huh? I can't believe you did that for me, Darius bubbled. I can't thank you enough. Ah, yes you can, Jasper grinned. Keep thanking me and I'll let you know when you're done. You're so stupid, Darius laughed. You're such an idiot sometimes. Yeah, but you love me. You think I'm hilarious. Yeah, Darius replied. I do. Jasper stared at his face, and for a moment, his own smile fell behind his mask. Darius Damone was a beautiful man. He put a lot of effort into being a beautiful man. But more than that, he was funny. He was earnest in his own way. He was bold and he was daring and he was overwhelmingly confident in a way Jasper never could be. Sometimes he thought he might be in love with him. He shut that train of thought down immediately. He wasn't in love with him. He couldn't be in love with him. Grimwalkers couldn't feel love. They couldn't feel anything. Everything he thought he felt was an illusion, a facsimile of life the same way his body was. So no matter how much he wanted to lean forward and kiss him now, he didn't. Darius deserved to be loved, something Jasper could never do, never give him. So he didn't. He never did. Are you not taking point? Lilith asked with a hint of annoyance in her voice. Well, more than a hint. Jasper snorted. No, he replied, throwing his staff onto his shoulder and resting his arms on it. This is your mission. I'm following your lead today. Feel free to give me orders. I might even follow them. She grimaced in obvious irritation and sighed, waving at the company of Coven scouts she'd put together to follow her as they marched away from the castle. Jasper elected to sit cross-legged on his staff and hover about 4 feet off the ground instead. Lilith said nothing, but held her head high and kept her back straight as they entered Bonesborough and its citizens closed their windows and backed away into the shadows. All was going quite well. She knew better than to test her luck with her superior no matter how annoying he was being. She was not lowering herself to petty games, and she was taking the full trip through town rather than flying, leaving a powerful impression on everyone they passed and further cementing her reputation and influence. All in all, she was passing her test with flying colors. All she needed to do now was stick the landing. Who goes there? Erupted a voice that rivals Jasper's own in annoyingness. A long, tube-shaped creature with the face of an owl burst through the trees as they neared the owl lady's abode. It was a house demon. Jasper had heard of them but had never seen one. They could be quite formidable, he'd read. He waited to see how she handled it. Hooty, I am here to speak with my sister, Lilith said tersely. You did bring a whole bunch of guys with you, Hoot, the demon, apparently named Hooty, replied. You know I'm not supposed to let anyone from the Emperor's Coven any closer, Hoot. Lilith sighed and retrieved something from her skirt pocket. It was wrapped in several layers of paper, and he observed curiously as she unwrapped a dead mouse. Here, said Lilith, holding the mouse at arm's length with sour expression. "Oh boy, hoot!" yelled Hooty before he put Lilith's entire arm in his mouth and then surged backward, as if he were a withdrawn yo-yo. The mouse had vanished from her hand. She wiped it on her skirt with a grimace. "Come," she instructed, "but don't raise your weapons. He's only placated enough to let us approach, and he will still attack if further provoked." She knew her enemy well. She came prepared and summarized what her soldiers needed to know succinctly and efficiently. "Ida!" Lilith called from outside the house, stamping her staff against the ground. "Come out!" He distantly heard a clatter like pots falling, and after a moment the front door opened, and an old woman in her pajamas with bright orange hair leaned against the door frame with a mug of apple blood. "Hey, Lily! Did you bribe Hooty again?" the owl lady asked casually. "I'm weak, Hoot!" "Not important, Idlin," Lilith asserted. "I'm taking you in." Ida barked laughter before she suddenly stopped. "Ha! Oh. Wait, you're serious?" "Yes, I'm serious," Lilith snapped. "You are a wild witch and a wanted criminal who stands perpendicular to peace and order, and you have been given many chances to change your ways. Today, it ends." Ida blew a raspberry. "Boo. Talk normal." "Idlin, will you please take this seriously?" "Absolutely not." Ida rolled her eyes before they set upon Jasper. "You brought the Emperor's golden boy with you." "He's a powerful witch, Ida," she said assertively. "As am I." Yeah, I don't feel like fighting today, Lily. Hooty, get them off my property." She turned to go back inside. "Sure thing, Ida!" With that, Hooty shot out from the door and began whipping through Coven Scouts like bowling pins. "Idlin!" Lilith snapped before she raised her staff. Jasper decided it was time to participate. He flashed up forward and directly into the foyer of the witch's home in front of her, and barely had time to register her surprised expression before he raised a boot and kicked her in the gut, sending her stumbling backwards to fall on her back in the dirt. He looked up at Lilith in time to observe her surprised and frightened expression and jot it down in his internal notes. "Ow! Hell!" the owl lady groaned before she drew a rapid spell circle that produced a force shield to block an energy blast from her sister. "Albert!" An owl palisman flew past Jasper and transformed midair to land in Ida's hand. She swung a leg up over her staff from the ground. "Oh, no, you don't!" yelled Lilith, throwing her staff up with a twirl to summon a dome of magic around the three of them. With her free hand, she threw another bolt of magic that Ida dodged, sending it ping-ponging through the dome. Jasper drew a spell circle with his staff and summoned a circle of illusion golden guards around the inside perimeter of the dome before he darted forward and drew his weapon back to strike. She flipped off of her palisman and raised it as she landed on the ground, blocking the overhead attack and sliding through the dirt from the force of it. Jasper flashed up through the air and to her other side behind her as his illusions darted around the space, making it impossible to tell which was really him. The owl lady drew circles with both hands, rapidly summoning stone spikes from the ground that sprung up and went through illusory Jaspers and vanishing them in a puff of smoke. Lilith winced as she fought to keep the dome up at the same time that she summoned a wraith of vines to shoot out and grab Ida's staff, dragging it to the ground. The owl lady gasped and snapped her head up to Lilith as she fired off another bolt of magic in her direction. Jasper watched it with eager fascination as Ida's eyes suddenly shifted and locked onto him, the real him, and he saw her thinking, calculating, and then, in a brilliant burst of magic, she flash-stepped out of the way. Lilith froze. "How did you do that?" Ida looked somewhat surprised, as if she hadn't been entirely sure that would work, before a huge smile spread across her face. "Because, sister," she grinned, "I'm better than you." Lilith's calm and professional demeanor vanished, replaced by absolute fury. Jasper stood calmly back as she released the dome and shot forward, smashing down a hammer of magic that struck Ida and knocked her to the ground. The wild witch drew a spell circle with her foot, and a thatch of moss caught her gently as she backflipped up and onto her feet again. But Lilith was not done. Strike after strike, she moved in as Ida dipped and dodged and fired back, growing just as serious. Jasper wondered if perhaps they would burn down the whole forest like this. He gave his staff a twirl and brought a wall of stone bursting from the ground beneath them that rose into the sky. They both skid to a surprised halt. "That's enough," said Jasper. "I've seen all I've needed to." He whistled at the Coven Scouts, covering the ground and moaning while Hooty passed out teacups. "Fall back, everyone. We're done here." "What?" Lilith balked. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" "Home," he replied simply, walking away. said Ida, peering around the wall. Are we still fighting? Lilith stammered, flabbergasted. I guess? Lilith! The Golden Guard ordered. Retreat. No, said Lilith, arms dropping to her sides. I guess... no. We're not. Oh! Ida looked just as confused as she did. Well, come back soon, I guess. I guess, Lilith mumbled. Hesitantly, she glanced back at Ida before she followed, jogging up to his side. What was that? She hissed. What are you doing? Congratulations, he replied. You passed. Passed what? A test, he answered. Report to the Emperor upon our return. She said, screwing up her face in confusion. All right. He grinned behind his mask. Those were some pretty slick moves, kid. Her face fell immediately sour. She hated when he called her that, which is exactly why he called her that. I know, she snapped. I'm a very powerful witch. Mm-hmm. He hummed in agreement. She was silent for a long moment. Teach me that teleport move you do. The one Ida did, she clarified. Teach it to me. He huffed a laugh. Sure. Jasper carefully cut his steak into tiny squares, eyes on his plate in the silence of the empty dining room. The only sound was from him and Bellos eating dinner together. Emperor Bellos? Jasper asked, looking up. Bellos raised an eyebrow at him. Will you tell me another story about the human realm? Jasper asked hesitantly. Bellos was still and silent for a moment, before he smiled and sat back. Ah, yes. It's a wonderful place. You know, the rain there doesn't boil. What does it do? Jasper asked. It's cold, usually. Bellos hummed. Occasionally it even freezes. Like on the knee? Jasper beamed. Yes, like on the knee. Imagine it, spread out across whole empty fields. Pristine white snow as far as the eye can see. Jasper closed his eyes and tried to imagine it. It sounded beautiful. And in the summer the grass and the trees are lush and green. He went on. In the autumn, red and orange and yellow. The leaves fall and die before growing back in the spring. Red like ours? Jasper asked. No, not like ours, Bellos said, pausing before the last word. Much more brilliant. There's nothing quite like it here. I hope I get to see it, Jasper breathed. As do I, Jasper, Bellos said, and Jasper's Galderstone heart swelled. As do I. Jasper took a deep, wistful sigh before returning to his meal. Ah, yes, the Emperor hummed. How did your excursion with Lilith go? Well, Jasper answered, setting his fork down. The Emperor did not approve of speaking with one's mouth full. She fought her sister all out. Between the two of us, I believe we may have been able to bring her in. Good. Bellos nodded. Did you hurt her? No, Jasper replied. Not very much. Good, Bellos repeated. I still need her. Yes, Emperor, I understand. It is decided then, the Emperor said with a finality as he stabbed a bleeding piece of meat with his fork. Lilith Clawthorn will replace Astereth as the head of the Emperor's Coven. Yes, Emperor Bellos, Jasper agreed. Do we wait? No, Bellos dismissed, taking a bite of his dinner. Kill him. Chapter 4. Jasper was humming a song that he'd heard in town, threading it with bard magic to make little dancing red wisps and sparkles around himself as he walked. If Bellos saw him, he'd just say he was practicing, because he was always practicing, and it was a mindless type of easy magic that he could do without even thinking. He would not tell him that he just enjoyed the sparkles and the song, that it made him happy. Since, he couldn't really be happy. He tapped the wall between he and Bellos' room with his staff, a careful pattern along the stone that deactivated the spell ward there. The stone folded away, opening the secret corridor behind it, and he stepped inside, tapping it closed behind him and flipping his mask up on top of his head to see better. Red flickers lit up the dark stairwell as he made his way downwards until it opened up into the lab that he'd been grown in. He froze, immediately falling silent as the sparks of glitter and light around him burst and fizzled out. In the potting box against the far wall, a tiny hand was reaching out. Jasper scrambled across the room and dropped to his knees, grabbing the edge of the box with both hands as he leaned over it, eye level with Hunter's tiny palm. It was warm and pink, soft and a little dirty. He was alive. "Oh, Titan," Jasper breathed. "Oh, Titan!" He was ready. They weren't going to pick him yet, not until he was older, but he was viable. He was alive, and theoretically he could come out now. Jasper had been so worried about getting things wrong at the early stages, that the pieces wouldn't combine right, that the soil would be too hot or too cold or too alkaline or too loamy, and it just wouldn't take. But he was alive. "Hunter!" Jasper cried, a huge smile spreading across his face as he bounced on his knees. "Hunter! Hunter! Hunter!" Hunter, of course, did not respond because he was an infant sleeping in the ground. But he didn't have to. Jasper was elated, beyond elated. Hunter was alive. Jasper scrambled to his feet and sprinted back up the stairs and out into the hall, barely remembering to shut the door behind him as he full-on ran through the corridors to the throne room. He burst through the doors and skidded to a halt across the floor. "Bellows!" he cried, bouncing up and down and flapping his hands wildly. "Bellows! Hunter is up! He's ready!" Bellows sat completely still in his throne, mask turned towards him. In front of the Emperor stood Lilith Clawthorne, who'd also turned to look at him, eyes wide in confusion and alarm. 2 Coven Scout guards stood nearby, watching as well. His face fell. He should not have done that. He had entirely forgotten other people existed in his excitement. He'd also forgotten his face was uncovered. Jasper yanked his mask down as his heart began to race. He'd really messed up this time. He'd really messed up this time. "Who's Hunter?" asked Lilith. "Leave us," Bellows ordered as he stood. "Me?" Lilith prompted. "All of you," the Emperor growled. Jasper stood stone sleeper still as Lilith and the 2 guards walked past him towards the door. Lilith cast him a knowing glance with a smug smirk and a wrinkled nose, and then the door shut behind her. Jasper began to shake. "You idiot!" Bellows snapped, his curse flaring and rotten flesh thrashing against his arms beneath his cloak. "You nearly blurted out the most sensitive information we have like it was nothing! Do you have any idea what you nearly did?" "I do!" Jasper burst as he dropped to his knees and bowed his head to the floor, fully prostrate. "Emperor Bellows, I apologize. Please forgive me." "Forgive you?" Bellows yelled. "Forgive you? Give me one reason to forgive you." "Because I am your loyal servant, and it was a stupid, stupid mistake," Jasper cried. "I am so sorry. I would never do anything to risk your secrets on purpose." "You didn't have to!" The first strike hit him in the side of his temple, and stars burst across his vision. He fell to the side and forced himself back up onto his knees, ignoring the feeling of blood pouring over his eyelid. "Please don't kill me," Jasper choked. "Please, it will never happen again. You are my master, and I am your humble servant, the enactment of your will given mortal form, and I only live for you. Please, Emperor, Lord, Master, I am ashamed by my actions, and I beg you the opportunity to rectify them within my lifetime." "If he's ready, I may as well replace you now with a servant able to fulfill the most basic instructions I have given him," Bellows snarled. The next strike was not from his staff, but from his boot, smashing Jasper's hand like it was made of toothpicks. He could hear the bones snap. "He's still young to be of use to you," Jasper pleaded. "Please, if you kill me, you won't have anyone to help you. I can't leave you without a servant. Please, please, Bellows, I can't die without knowing you are protected." "And now you accuse me of being unable to protect myself?" The next stomp was onto his left kidney. "You think so highly of yourself that I rely completely upon your support?" No! No, never! Jasper begged. Bellows' staff hit him in the shoulder and knocked him back onto his side. His boot slammed onto his elbow and he felt the bones splinter. I am nothing! I am no one! I am a golem of dirt and I exist only to serve you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Another strike to the chest. A broken rib. One to the gut. Something burst inside. Through bleary, blood-filled eyes, he watched Bellows raise his staff. He wailed in pain as his feet turned suddenly to stone. It began to crawl up his legs, and he lost feeling in them. No, no, Bellows, Master, I'm sorry, he screamed. I have wasted so much time on you, Bellows snarled. You repay my kindness with insolence. I'm sorry, Jasper sobbed brokenly. I'm so sorry, Master. Please, I love you. Please, please, I love you. I will never disappoint you again, please. The agony in his belly faded away as it was petrified. Bellows stared down at him with contempt for a long moment, completely silent, before he waved his staff. The stone receded. His bones reformed. His skin knit back together. His body unbroke. Thank you, Jasper gasped. Thank you, thank you. Get out of my sight, Bellows snapped. He turned around to walk back to his throne. Of course, my lord. Jasper trembled, crawling backward towards the door. He stumbled to his feet, entire body still crying out in phantom agony, then burst through the doors and fled full speed through the halls until he reached his bedroom and threw himself onto his bed, crawling beneath the covers to shake uncontrollably. He grabbed Sprig from where he was hidden beneath his pillow and hugged him to his chest. It's okay, Jasper whimpered, rocking back and forth in a tight ball. You're not really scared. You're not really sad. You're not real. They're not real feelings. You're okay. You're okay. Despite his best reassurances, his body betrayed him, and he clutched the little frog in a death grip against his chest, then burst into tears and sobbed, open-mouthed and miserable, until his aching body gave out and he lost consciousness. Are you all right? Darius asked. Jasper blinked. What? He was standing in the middle of the training courtyard, where he'd been staring mindlessly into the middle distance for who knows how long, with Darius, meditating to hold his abomination form as long as he could tolerate. It was no wonder he hadn't noticed his blank expression and interrupted him sooner. Jasper looked up at the sky. It was growing dark. How long had he been here? I'm fine, he said distantly. Just thinking. About what? About his bones breaking. About Hunter's tiny hand. About Bellows. Alone without him. No one to confide in. No one as dedicated as he was to protect him. About getting Asterith alone and killing him. Nothing, he answered. Well, that's a load of griffin shit, Darius dismissed, pushing himself to his feet with a grunt. You want to actually tell me what's on your mind, or do you want to keep pretending that I don't genuinely care about your feelings? Jasper trailed off. He continued to stare at the sky as gray clouds began to settle in the early twilight. He wondered if it was going to rain. Made a mistake. A stupid one. Bellows is mad at me. Everyone makes mistakes, Darius replied as he stopped in front of him. You are the most unbelievably loyal, devoted person I've ever met. I'm sure no matter how mad at you he is, he knows that. The Emperor is not a forgiving man, Jasper mumbled. Darius was quiet for a long moment. Did he hurt you? Jasper snapped out of his reverie and met his eyes. What? Why would you ask that? I don't know, Darius admitted. I just have this feeling. I'm worried about you. Well, don't, Jasper snapped. The Emperor would never do that. Don't talk about him like that. Darius raised his hands, palms out in a show of surrender. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. Yeah, said Jasper vaguely, shoulders hiked up and hackles raised. Right. It's fine. I'm fine. He took a deep breath. I really messed up. Jasper looked at him. Really looked at him. Darius was worried about him. Deeply so. Darius was his only friend. The only person other than the Emperor who really cared about him. He was the only person other than the Emperor that he trusted. There were a lot of things he could never tell him. But that didn't mean he needed to keep everything a secret. I'm afraid of being replaced, he admitted. If I'm not there to protect him, who is? What if he replaces me with someone who isn't ready or isn't as strong or isn't as loyal and he gets hurt? I can't let that happen. He's the Emperor, Darius reminded him. He has an entire army protecting him. A castle full of the most powerful witches alive. His safety doesn't rely completely on you, Jasper. I guess, he said dubiously. He rubbed his arm anxiously and took a deep, shuddering breath. Could I have a hug? Please? Darius looked almost startled by the question. Jasper felt stupid and ashamed to ask for such a thing. It was weak and childish, and he was not a child. He'd never even been a child. He didn't need hugs. Bellows said they were beneath him. He was such a disappointment today. Jasper, Darius said sadly. Of course you can. Jasper melted into his arms, burying his face in his shoulder. It felt so good to be held. His embrace was warm and gentle, yet firm, and he found himself thinking almost bizarrely that he'd never felt so safe before in his entire life. He never wanted it to end. Eventually, he pulled away. Thank you. I'm sorry. I don't think I can train anymore today. I have too much on my mind to be productive. We don't have to train, said Darius. You look like you need some rest. Maybe. Do you want to come to my house? Darius asked. Take a nap outside the castle for a few hours? No, Jasper dismissed immediately. If Bellows found out, he probably would kill him. Besides, he needed to be available for Hunter. He wanted to check on him every 2 hours for the first week. But thank you. You should go home, though, before it rains. Rains? Darius repeated. A moment later, a drop of water fell between them and sizzled against the cobblestone. Darius jumped back. Rain! He cried. Right! Yes. I'm going home. He looked up at him earnestly. Take care of yourself, Jasper. All right? Jasper smiled at him. Of course, kid. Darius gave him a weak smile back before he was covered in abomination goo and vanished. Jasper looked up at the sky and shut his eyes. A few seconds later, a raindrop landed on his cheek, and his skin burned and blistered. Another hit his forehead. Another struck the bridge of his nose. He waited until he was soaked through and his skin bright red before he flash stepped under the parapet into the open-air corridor and spun his staff half-heartedly, healing his blistered and boiled skin until it was like new. He twirled it again and dragged all the water from his clothes, leaving him perfectly dry. He turned and trudged inside the castle, listening to the sound of rain as it fell behind him, Galderstone heart heavy in his chest. He wasn't sure how long he walked on the way back to his room before he heard laughter and turned a corner. The long hallway was dark, save for two old men in the center chattering away. Tyrion and Astereth. They looked up as he rounded the corner and then stopped, both of them still smiling. Jasper stared back at them, feeling empty. "Something wrong, Golden Guard?" asked Astereth with a mocking lilt to his voice. Astereth had never liked him. Without another thought, Jasper raised his staff and shot him through the chest. "What in Titan's name?" Tyrion cried in horror as he stumbled back and away. Astereth's lifeless body collapsed in a pool of blood. Jasper strode forward in silence, and Tyrion's eyes widened. He moved to draw a spell circle, and before he could, Jasper fired again and took his head off his shoulders. He walked up to the bodies beside each other and looked down at them. Blood was pooling on the floor and saturating the carpet. He stared at them for a long time, until footsteps approached and Lazarus turned the corner, followed by a group of Coven scouts. "Oh, my Titan!" she exclaimed in shock and horror, coming to a dead stop. "What happened?" "Tyrion finally got sick of Astra's shit, I guess," Jasper said flatly. "I got here just as he killed him. I aimed for his shoulder and missed when he moved. They're both dead now, but they have replacements in line at least." He finally looked up at one of the Coven scouts behind her. "You. Take the bodies to the Healer's Coven." He looked at another. "You. Clean this up before it stains." He looked back at Lazarus. "Go tell Bellis what happened. I'm going to bed." He stepped over the bodies, careful of the blood, and then walked past the group without another word. Chapter 5. "Emperor Bellos?" asked the Golden Guard. The Emperor looked up towards the door. His mask was off. "What do you want?" he snapped. The guard immediately straightened. The Emperor was in a bad mood. "I apologize, sir. I only meant to ask if you were all right. It's growing late." Bellos scowled for a long moment before he shook his head and groaned, leaning back into his chair. His desk was covered in drawings and schematics, and he'd even pulled apart one of his prototype artificial magic staves, all the pieces arranged neatly at the head of the table. He waved at the guard to enter. "My apologies," he muttered. "My irritation is not with you. This time." "I'm glad, sir." "It's this," Bellos grunted, waving a hand dismissively at his work. There was so much going on that the Golden Guard was not sure where to start. Sketches of portals and spell circles, notes on movement and animation, teleport magic like the flash step technique he'd taught him, and then the material components like dragon's wings, fairy's tears, and titan's blood. "What is it?" the guard inquired. "Without establishing a secure connection between this realm and its brother, the Day of Unity will fail," he explained bitterly. "Despite the centuries, I've not been able to recreate the portal door that once existed." "The one that the witch used?" Jasper probed curiously. "The one that killed Caleb?" "Precisely the one." Jasper scowled just thinking about her. She was long dead now, he knew that, but if she weren't, he would have made her pay for what she had done to Bellos and his brother. She was the perfect poster child for why wild witches were so dangerous and untrustworthy. "What about her door?" Jasper wondered. "Why can't you use that?" "She ensorcelled an archway using the blood of the Titan," Bellos sighed. "But there is no Titan blood now. I must find a new way." "You figured out the artificial magic for our staves," Jasper reminded him. "If anyone can figure it out, it's you." Bello hummed in bemused laughter. Thank you, Jasper. I suppose I needed a pep talk." Jasper beamed behind his mask. He'd done good. Bellos was pleased with him. "Would you like me to bring you your dinner here, sir?" Jasper asked. "Yes, please," sighed Bellos as he sat up again, waving him off. "You may eat in your quarters tonight. I'll be working late." "Yes, my lord," the Golden Guard said reverently with a duck of his head. With that, he returned the way he'd came. Jasper was resting his arms across the potting box where Hunter was growing, his eyes on the tiny hand reaching out. It was so Small? Had he really been that small? You're lucky, you know, Jasper informed him with a sigh. His untouched plate sat next to him on the floor. You get to skip all the boring years. When you come out, you'll already be a grown-up, just like me. He hesitated before pulling one of his arms free and reaching forward. He stopped, hand hanging in the air, before he touched Hunter's little palm with his index finger. Hunter squeezed it. Jasper's Galderstone heart melted in his chest and a dopey smile spread across his face. "Oh," he murmured. "Hi, Hunter." Hunter's grip did not falter. Well, Jasper hummed happily. "Bellows says they're boring, but I think that babies are really cute. He's probably right, though. Babies are a lot of work, diapers and everything, and you have to learn how to walk and talk, and it's so many years before you get to do anything useful. It's much better to come out of the ground ready to go. I don't know how long you'll be growing before it's time for you to replace me, but I hope it's a long one." He paused. "Don't worry, though. We know how to slow your development down once you hit, what would be 18, 19 for a normal witch? That's only going to take you a couple of years anyway, so you won't be old either, even if you don't take over for me for a long time. You'll be just ripe. The perfect age to be exactly who you're supposed to be." He stared at Hunter's little fingers wrapped around his and wished desperately that he could pull him out right now. Even if the early years were boring and difficult, it would be nice to be there for them. "We're special, Hunter," Jasper went on. "The Emperor made us, because there's no one else he can trust. Regular people have friends and families to distract them, but we don't. We're pure and fresh and different. We're important." The room was silent. "The Titan's dying," Jasper whispered. "No one else can know. They'll panic. People will do crazy stuff. People will get hurt. But the Emperor has a plan, and he's going to save everyone. For the past few centuries, he's been working so hard to put the pieces together, and he's been doing it all alone so that no one else has to bear that burden. All he has is us. I hope we're ready to save the Titan during my lifetime, or at least yours. Once it's time, he'll cast a big spell that uses everyone's magic together to revitalize it. If the Titan dies, so does everyone else here, but Bellows won't let that happen." He took a deep breath and smiled. "And that's why he needs us. We're both based on his brother, Caleb, who's the one that found out about the Titan dying in the first place. But a witch killed him, and Bellows knew he couldn't do it alone. So you see, you're based on someone special. That makes you special too. And me. You're going to do great things, Hunter. You're going to save people. The world will be better for us having lived in it." Hunter's hand went slack and released his finger. Disappointed, he drew his arm back and set his head down on his elbows. "And if something happens to me, I can die knowing that you'll be here to replace me. He won't be alone. Not ever again. That makes me feel much better." "Thanks, Mrs. Damone," Jasper beamed. "Not a problem, sweet pea." The old woman laughed. Jasper nibbled gratefully at the cookie she'd given him. "If you like them that much, you can take home the rest." "Oh, I can't," he dismissed. "I have a highly regulated diet. I'm already cheating." "You're not going to get fat," Darius scoffed at him from where he was fixing his jacket collar in the living room mirror. "Just take the cookies, Jasper. My mother does not need that many in the house." "He's just worried that he'll eat them all," Mrs. Damone pretended to whisper to him. "He has a terrible sweet tooth." Jasper giggled deviously and flashed his apprentice with a gap-toothed smile. "Oh, does he? I'm definitely not going to weaponize that later." "Don't you dare!" Darius snapped. His mother laughed as she wiped her hands off on a hand towel and left the room. Darius didn't look away from the mirror. "I've already got enough eyes on me for Tyrion's funeral, and it's only going to get worse after I'm sworn in as a coven head. I do not need the weight." "Oh, lighten up, kid," Jasper groaned. It's not like Tyrion was a toothpick. I am not Tyrion. No, definitely not. Tyrion was a bore. You shouldn't talk ill of the dead, you know, Darius said disapprovingly. Especially since you killed him. Not on purpose. Does it really not bother you? Darius asked, suddenly serious. He turned from the mirror to lock eyes with him. Jasper, you killed a man. He killed Asteris first, Jasper reminded him. I wasn't trying to kill him. It was an accident. Jasper, you blew his head off. Jasper shrugged. Darius looked deeply unsettled. Should it bother me? Jasper asked, tilting his head to the side. Darius balked, for once at a loss for word. Jasper, you killed a man. I know, Jasper frowned. I was there. Darius wavered uneasily, eyes still following him. I guess it would bother me, if it were me. Well, it wasn't you, Jasper replied. I'm glad it wasn't you. If killing someone would bother you, then I'm really glad you didn't have to kill anyone. Yeah, said Darius warily. Well, Jasper announced, clapping his hands together. Either way, he's dead and you get his job. And that's great, right? I guess. I would have been all right to wait a few more years for him to retire, though. Darius shook his head and cast a final glance into the mirror before he stepped away. This is not how I wanted to come into the position. Jasper resisted the urge to scoff. Coven heads never retired. They held on until they shriveled up and died. Tyrion might have been old, but he could have hung on for another miserable 20, 30 years if he'd really wanted to. And Darius more than deserved his job. That's why Jasper had gotten it for him. Come on, then, Jasper bubbled with a smile. It's funeral time. Remember to look real pouty and sad because you have a face people can see. He pulled his mask down. I'll be standing in the corner looking however I want because no one can tell I'm making clown faces behind this. Bleh! He stuck his tongue out for emphasis. Darius smiled weakly. Well, at least I can't ever feel too sad around you. Jasper flashed him a wink he couldn't see and fired off a pair of finger guns. Don't you know it? He translocated them both to the castle graveyard for the televised event that would be consuming the remainder of their evening. Jasper hugged his arms across his chest beneath his cloak, squeezing Sprig as tightly as he could. The stuffed toy didn't make him feel much better in the bitter weather, but it also didn't make him feel any worse. The wind whipped around him and screamed through the mountaintops, snow whirling around uncontrollably. He could barely see 2 yards in front of himself. Desperately wished he could at least fly and save his poor feet from freezing, but with the wind the way it was, he had to hike. He'd been to the knee before. He'd had to hike it with a squad of scouts, and none of them had been allowed to use magic. 2 of their rank had died, and the others had insisted against Jasper's suggestion to leave their bodies behind. When they ran out of rations, he'd then suggested that bringing them along could have been a blessing in disguise, and for a moment he had thought they might actually all band together and kill him. He'd broken away from the party and found his way down by himself after that. Jasper had never been well liked by others. They found him annoying. They found him weird. They found him loud and abrasive. And said he asked too many questions and never learned how to read a room. So Jasper stopped meeting new people. The Golden Guard took over that job. He was much better at it. Stoic, cool, effective. People might not like him, but at least they respected him. He breathed a heavy sigh of relief as he stumbled into a cavern that blocked off the wind and let him finally stretch his aching limbs. Without the blizzard hampering his movements, he stood up straight and whirled out his staff, banishing the frostbite that had been climbing up his toes and warming his whole body back up to a reasonable temperature. He flopped down onto it again, to leisurely fly side saddle through the tunnels until he found what he was looking for. Eclipse Lake. He hopped down, holding Sprig to his chest, one-handed as he trailed the head of his staff through the sand with the other. He frowned as he circled the dry lake bed, his heart clutching in his chest as he did. There was no Titan's blood here. There perhaps had not been in many years. He'd hoped so badly that he could find some, even just a drop, to bring back to Bellows to thank him for letting him live a little longer. But there was nothing here. He hung his head in misery, listening to the wind whistle through the distant tunnels, and then began screaming at the top of his lungs until his throat was so sore and screamed out that it hurt. "And where have you been?" asked Lilith Clawthorne snidely, her nose in the air. She looked down at him as if he was dirt beneath her feet. Jasper scoffed, squeezing Sprig beneath his cloak. "What's it to you, kid?" Her upper lip curled. "Well, as your superior, I'd like to know." Jasper frowned. "Superior? Since when are you my superior?" "Since 2 hours when Darius and I were sworn in as coven heads," she informed him. "You were absent." Ice rippled through his body. He felt colder than he had on the knee. "The Emperor was quite cross when no one could find you, you know. I think he's looking forward to having a word with you about it." She smiled in a mean way and then continued down the corridor. Jasper's heart began to race. He could feel sweat on the back of his neck. He waited until she turned the corner and left him alone to shakily raise his staff and summon a tiny orb of abomination matter that covered the little frog and translocated it back to his room. He had other places to be. Chapter 6. Jasper pushed the door to the throne room open and peeked in, desperately hoping Bellows was not there. The Emperor sat on his throne with his hands carded in front of his face, torches roaring with fire behind him and the Titan's great living heart beating like a ticking clock above him. They were alone in the chamber. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him, crossing the room to kneel in front of the Emperor. Silence. He began to sweat, the nearby flames throwing heat across his body. Despite that, his hands felt clammy and he swallowed around the lump in his throat. Jasper took a deep, steadying breath. He relaxed his posture. He gathered up all of his fake feelings, his fear and his grief and his panic, and he put them in a box and smoothed it out flat. He folded Jasper away. "Emperor Bellows," said the Golden Guard, "I apologize for my failure." "Do you?" asked the Emperor. "I am shamed by my actions," the guard continued. I don't care what you were doing." The Emperor interrupted him. The guard fell silent. "You were not present at today's ceremony." "I was not aware it was today." "Oh, I apologize. I didn't realize you had such a busy schedule. I'll need to check in with you in the future. Are you free tomorrow for a petrification?" The guard resisted a shiver. "Yes, sire, I understand I have failed you twice in a row." "Not you," the Emperor dismissed coolly. "Your former apprentice." Jasper froze. He looked up. "What?" "I wonder how stupid you think me to be," the Emperor asked as he rose to his feet and folded his hands behind his back. He crossed the throne room to circle his golem. "Do you believe I don't know why you killed Tyrion?" He stammered. "You inconvenience me," Bellows sighed. "He's not nearly as trustworthy yet as Tyrion was. No one believes your little story, and it's a terrible look for me. You're fortunate that no one liked Astereth and that people liked Darius more than they did Tyrion." "My lord," Jasper rasped, throat dry. "I am so sorry. So, it's inconvenient, but you have served me well up till recently. I let you have your apprentice. It kept you busy when I didn't need you. But clearly, you have become distracted. You have allowed your pet project to overwhelm your good judgment, and you have forgotten who you serve." Bellows knelt down and tilted his chin up to look him in the eye. "Do I need to kill Darius Demone, Jasper?" the Emperor asked curiously. Jasper's magenta eyes widened and the world fell away around him. He'd never felt so small before in his life. "No," he said weakly. "No, please." "Please?" the Emperor asked. Jasper began to shake his head rapidly. His eyes started to water. No, please. Master, kill me instead, please. It's my fault. They're my mistakes. Please punish me, not him." "I am punishing you." "Please!" Jasper cried and sat all the way up, panic blooming rapidly in his chest like icicles between his ribs. "Please, please! I deserve it. It's my fault. I'm bad. Please!" "I punish you to make you better, Jasper," the Emperor reminded him. "It is the only way you learn from your mistakes. But clearly, the usual methods are no longer adequate." They are, I promise," Jasper yelled. "I'm so sorry. Please, I'll be better. I'll do better." The Emperor regarded him in stony silence before he stood. "Show me then." "What?" "Punish yourself for me," said the Emperor, looking down at him like God upon a sinner. Jasper's mouth was dry, his eyes wide and unblinking. No words formed in his throat. "Or should I punish Darius after all?" the Emperor inquired. Without any further hesitation, Jasper tore his dagger from his boot and plunged it into his belly. He wailed through grit teeth, hands shaking against the handle. His usual tolerance for pain didn't quite feel enough somehow. Agony burst through his gut like fireworks, and the tears in his eyes spilled fully over. The Emperor continued to his throne and lounged back in it casually, leaning against the armrest and tilting his head down at him. He waved a hand. "Continue," he instructed. Jasper breathed heavily, his chest heaving with a miserable, raspy whistle through his teeth. He set his jaw and pulled the blade free with a whimper, and tightened his grip and plunged it in again. And again. And again. Jasper stumbled through the halls, staff gripped loosely at his side and vision swaying along with his body. He took unsteady steps forward, one by one, thoughts too messy and scattered to pull into anything coherent. All he could think was, "Home. I want to go home." His feet carried him on autopilot mindlessly, and he only distantly registered the people he passed. Coven scouts, Lilith Clawthorn, Lazarus, Terra Snapdragon. He felt like he was melting between his own fingers when he came to a stop in front of his door. No, not his door. Half in a daze, Jasper reached up and knocked. A moment later it opened. "Jasper!" Darius beamed. "I missed you at the ceremony. I'm still unpacking. Where have you been?" Jasper was silent. Where had he been? Sifting through his memory, he felt like trying to catch smoke with his bare hands. He was silent, uncertain of what to say. "Jasper?" Darius said, his face beginning to fall. "Come to the roof with me," Jasper said hoarsely. "I want to stargaze." "Right now?" Darius raised an eyebrow. "Yeah," Jasper confirmed. "Right now." Darius looked conflicted, but after a long moment of consideration, he nodded and stepped out, shutting the door behind him. He held out his hand, and Jasper accepted it before they translocated together to his favorite spot for stargazing. He sat down and crossed his legs. Silently, Darius joined him. Jasper stared up at the twinkling night sky as if he'd never seen it before. He felt so small beneath it. He wondered what stars were, where they went at night, what they were made of. Did they have titans too? He wasn't supposed to feel things. He was supposed to be empty, hollow. He had been made as an extension of another's will and intent, not an individual, and yet he didn't want Darius to die. He shouldn't feel this way. He shouldn't feel anything at all. It shouldn't make his Galderstone heart skip a beat at the idea. It should not make his throat close up and his hands shake. "Jasper?" Darius asked, shaking him from his reverie. "Will you promise me something?" he asked. Darius blinked. "What?" "If something ever happens to me," he said in a small voice, unable to meet his eyes, "promise me you won't do anything about it. You won't ask any questions. You won't get involved." Darius sat up straight, eyes widening and ears swiveling upwards. "What? What are you talking about?" Jasper finally turned from the sky to look at him, pleading, desperate, earnest, all feelings he wasn't supposed to have that churned in his gut, along with the phantom memory of a blade pressing through his flesh and stomach acid spilling out into his intestines. "Promise me, Darius. I need you to promise me." "I can't do that," Darius balked. "Jasper, if something happened to you, Darius!" Jasper yelled, surging forward to grab his coat by the collar. Panic bloomed in his chest as visions of Darius turned to stone or bleeding out in the throne room burst across his vision. "Promise me you won't do anything!" "Okay!" Darius cried in alarm, raising his hands in a show of surrender. Okay. I promise." Jasper relaxed. He let go of the jacket and sat back, looking down. He took a deep breath and let it out. "Okay. Thank you." "Why do I need to promise that?" Darius asked. Jasper looked at him with weary, tired eyes. He smiled weakly. "It's not important," he said sadly. "What is important is I'm glad I got to know you. Thank you for being my friend." "Jasper." Darius trailed off. It was all right. It didn't matter. Jasper had been born knowing that he was going to die eventually, that once his usefulness ended, he would be replaced, that the duty he performed made it very likely he would die before that happened anyway. His own expiration date was something he could live with. He could not live with Darius's. Jasper had been the one to bring him up to the castle in the first place when he made him his apprentice. He was the one who had pushed for his friendship, and he was the one that had secured him both his deputyship and his subsequent promotion. It was all his fault. "It's fine," Jasper said, weakly putting on a smile and trying to sound like he wasn't crumbling to pieces behind a mask he wasn't wearing. "Don't worry. Nothing is going to happen to you. I'll make sure of it." Jasper rested his head in his arms against the potting box, his thumb in Hunter's tiny hand and holding it gently in his own. He rubbed his wrist gently with his forefinger and wondered if he could feel the soothing gesture, or if his movement was all reflex. "Are you there?" he murmured. "Can you hear me?" Hunter did not respond. "Are you real?" he asked. "Am I real?" He felt sick. Nothing made sense anymore. He was supposed to know exactly who he was and what he was supposed to do. Who he was supposed to be. He'd never wavered in his faith before. Why did he feel this way? He didn't want to. He wanted to believe in Belos, who had created him, who had trained him, trusted him. But he shouldn't want that either. He shouldn't want anything. "Everything is so confusing, Hunter," said Jasper miserably. "I don't know what to think anymore." He rubbed Hunter's hand again. I wonder anyway. No, I know. I don't know if my joy or my sadness or my fear is real. But I know my love is real." He choked on a breath. "I love Belos." he said, his voice breaking. I do. He made me. He cares about me, and he wants me to be good. That's real. And I love Darius, too. I do. I love him. I know I do. He swallowed, eyes burning. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe I'm not supposed to love anything, but I do. I love him. But what do I do about it? He sniffled. Bellows will hurt him. I messed up, Hunter. I messed up. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to fix it. Jasper trembled minutely. I have to do something, he continued. I have to find a way to be useful again. I have to make up for all of my mistakes. If I could just find some Titan's blood. There wasn't any at Eclipse Lake. And I know it's forbidden. I know I'm not supposed to go there. But the Titan's skull is a sacred place. But he swallowed. I have to do something. I have to fix it. I'll do anything to fix it. It's the only place anyone would hesitate to mine out. If there's a drop of it left anywhere on the Isles, it's there. He shook his head and squeezed Hunter's tiny hand, hoping against hope that he could feel it. I love Velos, and I love Darius, and I love you, Hunter. I love you so much. Do you know that? Can you feel it? He took in a deep, shuddering breath. Maybe I'll never get to meet you. Maybe I'll be dead before you get to live. Maybe you'll never know how much I love you. But I love you. His tears spilled over. You're loved, Hunter, he sniffled. You're so loved. Chapter 7. Jasper dressed himself carefully in his bedroom. If he was going to commit sacrilege, he may as well look nice for it. So, he brought out his leather kit to rub conditioner into his boots and his gloves with a soft brush. He shined the brass toggles on his leather cuirass with lemon juice and baking soda. He restitched the torn quilting in his wool gambeson with strong upholstery thread. He bleached his cloak back to ivory. He polished his mask until it shone. As he was waiting for the leather to condition, he curled sideways in his bed and held Sprig in his hands, rubbing his thumbs across the fabric to feel the texture beneath his fingertips in soothing motions. He loves me, Jasper murmured, and he wasn't entirely sure who it was he was even talking about. Bellows? Darius? The Titan itself? He sniffled, but he didn't cry. He loves me, he repeated stubbornly, his voice barely more than a hoarse whisper that broke across the rocks like a cold ocean wave. Jasper hesitated before he stepped off of his staff and actually put his feet on sacred ground. He really wasn't supposed to be here. Even if Bellows hadn't forbidden anyone from disturbing this place, it simply wasn't somewhere one should go. It was the Titan's skull, the head of the living, feeling, thinking thing they all lived upon. It was a waking god, a life-giving vessel that deserved reverence and respect. And it was a waking god whose blood Jasper desperately needed. He found himself muffling his footsteps as he walked, as if silence would preserve some kind of dignity in his wake. Maybe it would. Swallowing around the lump in his throat, he clutched his staff against his chest with both hands and peered over the edge of the long platform before him, ears flat against his skull. It fell away to darkness below him, and he shook his head, returning his eyes to the tall, thin door before him. It remained ajar. With only a small amount of trepidation, he pushed it open and stepped into the next chamber, eyes following the stone pillars that rose to hold up the roof and the empty circular platform in the center. He looked around and still didn't see much that was very interesting. He inspected the little platform first. There was some sand there, and he dug through it a bit before it became clear that there was nothing interesting beneath it. He stood back up and trailed a hand along the walls of the cavern as he navigated its circumference, looking for something. He came to a halt in front of an opening to a small drop-off just outside of the main room. He stepped up to the edge and looked over it. Darkness. Shadow that went on forever. He shivered and looked around again, kneading the handle of his staff before his eyes fell upon the staircase that descended into the abyss. If any blood remained, it would be there. He had to keep going. He was in too deep not to go deeper now. His fingers trembled from the cold and he swallowed thickly. And how deep he was. Jasper was useful. He knew that he was. He had poured every ounce of strength and energy within his vessel into being so, and he knew that he was. It was in the Emperor's best interest to keep him around. Even though he'd failed lately, more than once, he could still be useful. The Emperor would benefit more from his presence than lack thereof. Why didn't he think so? The Emperor was smart, smarter than anyone else. He must see it. And Darius. Killing Darius right after Tyrion would be so suspicious. Would he really do it? It would be one thing if he killed Jasper too. He could blame it on him, but if he intended to leave him alive, what would it say to the rest of the Covenheads? The rest of the Boiling Isles? And he didn't have a replacement yet. Darius hadn't done anything wrong. He was still useful. Killing him was inefficient. It was pointless. It was wrong. The Emperor was never wrong. He'd never been wrong. He couldn't be wrong. He had made Jasper, and he had discovered the Titan's sickness, and he'd formulated the cure. He was good. He was righteous. He was wrong about Jasper not being able to feel. He wondered suddenly about those who had come before him. Could they feel? Were they like him, or was something wrong with Jasper? Was he a fluke? An anomaly? Some error in the creation process that had left him different? That would explain it. The Emperor treated him inefficiently because he was working with incorrect information. Grimwalker shouldn't be able to feel, but he did, and the Emperor had no way of knowing that, so... Jasper froze as he realized he had reached the end of the staircase. He had been so lost in his thoughts that he hadn't been paying attention until he went to take another step, and his foot hit the ground in a way that made his body lurch, and his stomach churn with the wrongness of it. There was a strange crack beneath his boot, where he'd put it down, like a twig or cracked pottery. With a wave of his staff, Jasper cast a light spell to bring the chasm out of the darkness, and then he dropped it. "Hello there, Jasper," smiled a kind-looking face, marred with dark green but with soft eyes that gazed at him full of warmth and affection. "That's your name, Jasper." "Jasper," Jasper repeated, blinking in the dim light. He looked down at where the man's hand held his own, resting in the soft soil, then back up as he gently brushed dirt from his hair with the other. "That's right," he continued. "My name is Belos. I made you. You're alive now." "I'm alive now," Jasper repeated again. It was strange to be alive. There was so much happening that hadn't been before. Sight, and sound, and smell, and touch, and taste, and knowledge blooming in his brain. His heart beat, his lungs filled. He was alive. Before him lay dozens, if not hundreds, of corpses. Jasper was no stranger to death. He had killed before, with orders and without. He understood the cessation of life and all that it entailed. Decomposition, decay, rot. He knew. He understood. He did not understand. He stared uncomprehending at the haphazard piles of bones and masks in front of him, around him, beneath him. He snapped his gaze to the floor to see what he had stepped on was a femur. Jasper yanked his foot up and stumbled forwards, whirling around as the room began to spin wildly. He lost his footing and fell onto his ass, hands behind him as he skittered backwards and away from what he'd done, just beginning to rise and fall rapidly. What was this? This wasn't a grave, this was a trash heap. A landfill. A discard pile. This was an unholy act in a holy place. No one had been meant to see this. But what was this? It wasn't just the bones. It was the masks, the shimmering gold that caught his light spell and cast eerie reflections along the stone walls and narrow pillars. There were so many of them. Why were there so many of them? The Golden Guards had always been grim walkers. It was a line that had gone unbroken for almost 400 years. Jasper had just passed 11 and was approaching the 12th anniversary of his raising, so he had assumed while he knew that there were many that had come before him, many could hardly mean more than 40. So why were there hundreds? Maybe they weren't all viable. Maybe some of them had come out of the ground dead. Maybe the ingredients hadn't combined right. Maybe the soil had been wrong. Growing Grimwalkers was complicated and touchy, and it was easy to lose them in the early stages. They'd had 3 or 4 fail to germinate before they got Hunter. Jasper had wanted to name him Feldspar or Onyx, but Bellows had already picked out Hunter, and masks. They all had masks. No failed sprout got a mask. They got wrapped in cheesecloth and added to the compost pit to recycle. They'd never been alive. They didn't get buried like the dead. Not that these had been buried either. Why were they even here? The skull was sacred. People didn't come here. Even Bellows didn't come here. He had said that he hadn't. He had said that no one should ever come here, not even him. He spoke to the Titan through its heart. Why were they here? How did they get here? How did they die? Jasper stumbled to his feet, legs shaking. He took a wobbly step forward in the direction of a pile of rib cages and wondered how they had become separated from the rest of themselves. This wasn't right. This wasn't what Bellows had told him. This didn't make any sense, and it had to make sense. It had to. There must be something he didn't know, something he hadn't been told, and a good reason that he hadn't been told, because this didn't make sense. He needed to go home and tell Bellows what was here. He needed him to explain it. He needed him to make it make sense. There was a crack beneath his boot. He'd stepped on another bone. Of course he had. They were everywhere, like some kind of sick confetti parody. And he looked down at it as he raised his foot, and then his whole world fell apart. The seams that had held the tapestry together came undone. The rug pulled out from beneath him. The wool fell from his eyes. The puppet strings snapped. The bone that he'd broken beneath his boot belonged to a tiny arm attached to a tiny skeleton, wrapped in a tiny cloak, and wearing a too big golden mask on its lifeless skull. It was a kid. It was a dead kid. And carved into the stone floor before that dead kid's outstretched arm and tiny ground-short finger bones were 5 red-streaked words. He is lying to you. Chapter 8. Jasper dropped to his knees and puked his guts up. He'd seen plenty of corpses and never puked from them. He'd used manure in the planters and the smell had never moved his stomach. Even food, he was a picky eater and he hated almost anything with flavor, but he never threw up. And yet here he was, puking on someone's bones beneath the Titan's skull. At least he'd missed the kid, and it was only someone else's corpse that he was further desecrating. He choked on a sob as he finished retching, feeling hollow and empty. His arms shook with the effort of keeping himself up. He looked up again through eyes swimming with tears at the bones of a kid who had died, carving out a warning that no one might ever even see. Had he had a name? Had he had feelings? Had he died hoping he'd be the last one that did? Jasper wailed as he shut his eyes again and buried his face in his knees, hands over his head and fists clenching so hard in his hair that it began to pull out. His world was ending without him, and he was bowing beneath the weight, ready to break like a reed. He had to get out of here. No, not just here. He had to get as far away as possible. He's lying to you. He had to get away from the castle and never go back. Nothing made sense anymore. He's lying to you. Was the Titan really dying? Was the Titan even alive? Was Caleb real? Had he ever been real? Lying to you. How old was Bellows? Why did he make him? Why did he make any of them? Why did he make so many of them? He's lying to you. He shoved himself to his feet and wobbled dangerously, stumbling backwards and yanking his mask down as the room swayed. He would get out of here, and he would get an airship, an independent one, not a coven one. He didn't need anyone tracking him. He'd take it and he'd sail as far as he could, find some other dead Titan to live on. He knew there were others. He'd seen them mentioned in old restricted books he hadn't told Bellows he'd read. He just had to find one. And then he needed to find a way not to be recognized. Maybe he could use an illusion stone to get rid of his scars, or he could make new scars that would hide the old ones. He could shave off his hair. He couldn't leave Hunter. He took deep, shuddering breaths, rib cage expanding and receding, the fancy toggles of his cuirass biting into his skin, the nice wool of his gambeson too hot suddenly. Hunter was still there. He couldn't leave Hunter. Jasper looked down at the little boy on the ground, the dead boy who had died, writing a warning, carving it into the stone with his very bones. He refused to let his message be washed away by time or anything else. He had died filled with love and fury and fear alone, but refusing to concede to apathy. He wasn't going to live, but he died, hoping that someone would. He'd gotten his warning out. Jasper had seen it, but he would never know what he had done for someone who'd followed in his miserable footsteps. He would never know that he'd succeeded. He would never even know who Jasper was. He died knowing that he would never know. Jasper picked up his staff from the ground in a shaking hand and had to hold his wrist with the other just to keep the grip firm enough not to drop it. He was scared suddenly. Scared like he'd never been before in his life. But he could run. He could run right now. He wasn't scared for himself. He'd never been scared for himself. Hunter was tiny. He'd not even had a chance to take his first breath yet, but he was alive in there. He was alive in there, and he'd be alive when he got pulled out too. Then he would be another little skeleton in a too big uniform, and there wouldn't be anyone there to protect him. Jasper could not allow that to happen. He'd spent months growing him, micromanaging the soil acidity, the moisture, the aerated mica, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium. He'd watered him every day, turned the soil, refreshed the fertilizer, tracked his growth, charted his progress. He had told Hunter that he loved him, and it was true. It was truer than anything else he'd ever known. He loved him. Hunter wasn't Bellows's. He was his. And Jasper would not leave him there. When Jasper arrived back at the castle, he was no longer shaking. He kept his back straight and his chin high, stepping off of his staff to stride with purpose through the entrance chambers and down an elegant corridor, staff in hand and cape billowing out behind him. One of two things was going to happen tonight. He was going to save Hunter and get out of here, or he was going to die. One way or another, this was the Golden Guard's last night alive. If things went badly, he would pull Hunter from the ground, get caught, and probably get them both murdered. He'd die in agony, and best case scenario, No one ever found out what happened to him. But maybe Hunter lived to be an indoctrinated child soldier at least. Worst case scenario, Jasper was labeled a traitor, and he got the baby that he'd been growing for the last 9 months murdered too. But at least, in that best case scenario, Hunter wouldn't be alone. If Jasper didn't get Darius involved, if he didn't know anything, Bellows wouldn't kill him. He'd kill him to punish Jasper, sure, but only if Jasper was still alive to be punished. If he was already dead, there'd be no point. Darius was not going to die tonight. Jasper would make sure of it. He needed to be alive in case Jasper wasn't. He needed to live because someone had to be there for Hunter. If Jasper was gone, someone had to take care of him. Someone had to make sure he was safe. Someone had to make sure he was happy. And Jasper knew that Darius would do that. Darius loved him. Even if he'd never said it, Jasper knew he did. And he would love Hunter, too, as soon as he met him. He wouldn't let Hunter go as deep as Jasper had. He wouldn't let him sink. He would watch out for him. He knew he would. But if things went well, he shouldn't even think about it. He shouldn't even dare. He could take Hunter, he could run, find somewhere safe and far away, and then come back for Darius. They could find some nice place to live, whatever Darius wanted. Probably something pretty, something fancy, something expensive looking. He'd figure it out. Jasper was strong. He was smart. He could work. He could do lots of jobs. Jobs paid money. Maybe they could do something romantic like travel the countryside as roving vigilantes rescuing people from wild witches. Teach Hunter abomination magic and how to do cartwheels. Jasper could give him his staff. Maybe even finally tell Darius that he couldn't do magic without it. No matter what, though, he could not tell Darius what he was about to do. But he passed through his hall anyway, stopped at his door, and stared at it. This might be the very last time he would ever see him. But not the other way around. He'd see Jasper's face again, or he'd see Hunter's. Either way, they were the same face. He raised a fist and knocked. Darius opened the door in a soft bathrobe, eyes weary and visibly frustrated at having been woken so early. His whole face changed, for a moment, to something fond and happy, and then to concerned and alarmed. "Jasper?" he asked as he straightened up, knitting his eyebrows together. "It's..." He glanced away. 3 a.m. "I know. I just had to speak to you before I left," said the Golden Guard. Jasper couldn't be here right now. Jasper's voice would warble. His hands would shake. Jasper would break. "Left?" Darius said warily. "Where are you going?" "A mission," the guard dismissed. "A dangerous one. Don't worry about that right now." "What kind of mission?" Darius asked. It was quite clear that he did, in fact, worry. "Classified," the Golden Guard replied. "Listen, I might not come back from this one. Do you remember what we talked about?" "Yes," Darius said warily. Of course he was wary. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was wrong. He knew something was very wrong. He didn't know what, but he also couldn't know what. But he knew what mattered. He knew that if he knew, he'd be dead. "Good," said the guard as he relaxed. He knew what he needed to know. He knew that he couldn't know. That's all that mattered. But he knew something. It was all over his face. His worried, beautiful face. Probably the only one that had ever looked at him with genuine affection in his whole life. The only one he'd ever stared at through his mask, when he couldn't see he was doing so, watching his lips move and hoping stupidly, childishly, that one day he might touch them with his own. Hesitantly, Jasper reemerged. He raised a gloved hand to touch his cheek and wished that he could feel his skin against his own. One more time. Behind his visor, his eyes burned and his mouth was dry. He may never see that face again, never touch that cheek. He may never say anything to him again. He ought to make it count. "Trust your heart," he said, his voice edging towards a falter. He couldn't know, but he needed to understand. And nothing else. Darius leaned minutely into his touch, so little that he might not have even realized he was doing so. But Jasper had. He saw it. He could tell. If he died today, at least he would die knowing that someone, even one person, had loved him. "Jasper, Darius began. "It's all right," he interrupted, and he could hear his own voice beginning to shake. He could not know, but he needed to understand. One way or another. "You'll see me again," he all but whispered. Darius' lips parted to speak, and Jasper drew his hand away, straightening up and forcing himself to stop trembling. He had wasted too much time. He had no more left to give. It was time to go. He turned away in silence and lowered his gaze dangerously, retreating through the halls towards his death or his delivery. The golden guard slammed the cage door shut on his martlet heart and swallowed the key. Jasper stopped outside of the secret door between his and Belos's rooms. He briefly considered walking right into the Emperor's bedchambers and shooting him in the head. He couldn't do that. Even if Belos was killing kids, he was still saving the Titan. Probably. Maybe. What else could he be doing? What would the point of it all be if he wasn't? He tapped the wall as quietly as he could and descended into the darkness. The room emerged as it always did, damp and dim and perfectly managed. Managed by him. He took off his mask. He set it down on the slab in the center of the room along with his staff. He sat down on his knees in front of the planter box. He took several deep breaths as he stared down at Hunter's little hand, reaching out and waiting. His tiny, perfect little hand. This was it. This was the point of no return. He could go back to his room right now, sleep until morning, and pretend he'd never seen anything. Everything could go back to normal. It could still be okay. He wrapped his hand around Hunter's and felt his little fingers squeeze back. Jasper released the breath he was holding and pulled. The loose soil fell away and he dug it out with his free hand, then slipped it around the little Grimwalker's back to support him as he rose from the box. Suddenly, easily, as if it were nothing, his little face emerged, eyes scrunching shut against the light and nose wrinkling. "Hey, kid," Jasper said softly, brushing away the dirt from his eyes and his mouth. He couldn't stop his own lips from curling upward. Hunter had come out perfectly, flawlessly. A beautiful, healthy baby boy. He could feel his eyes watering before they spilled down his face. Jasper didn't cry often, only during and after his worst beatings and in the Titan's skull earlier, but this was so different. He was so happy. He'd never cried from being happy before. Hunter whined in the back of his throat, balling his free hand into a little fist, and then he opened his eyes, bright pink irises looking around the room before locking directly onto his own. "Hey," Jasper repeated with a warbly sniffle. "Hey there, Hunter. It's so nice to meet you." Hunter cried out, toothless little mouth open wide. Jasper couldn't stop himself from laughing. "Listen to those pipes," he chuckled, picking him up to hold him against his chest, little head tucked against the crook of his neck. Jasper held the back of his head, careful of his neck, pressing a kiss against his temple. His hair was so thin and soft, pale blonde, like his own. Of course it was. Everything about him was like him. When he grew up, they'd be practically identical. And Titan below. He was going to grow up. That's it, he murmured, Galderstone heart swelling in his chest with overwhelming warmth. "I've got you. Nothing is going to hurt you." He tilted his head back to look down at him. "Welcome to the world, Hunter. I've been waiting for you." "Have you?" Jasper's blood ran cold. The warmth in his chest vanished. His gaze froze, locked on the wall in front of him. Hunter continued to cry. "Now, Jasper," Bellows said admonishingly, "he doesn't look quite ready to me." Jasper whipped around, shifting Hunter into one hand and grabbing his staff from the table. "No," grabbing empty air from the table. Bellows stood in the doorway, holding Jasper's staff in his hand and dressed in all of his finery. His expression was mostly neutral, save for the tiny upward tilt in his lips and the softness in his eyes. "Don't come any closer," Jasper growled. "You don't want me to see my new Grimwalker?" Bellows asked curiously. "I'd like to make sure he's healthy." "He's fine," Jasper snapped. "Is he?" Bellows wondered. They stared at each other for a long moment of tense silence. The sound of Jasper's blood rushing in his ears, both hands tightening where they held Hunter against his chest. Bellows twitched first, and Jasper charged forward in a blind panic, straight through him and up the staircase. I've got you, he whispered frantically, hurtling up the stairs at full speed as ice bloomed through his chest in crystalline shapes, hardening around his bones and turning his organs to stone in his belly. He couldn't teleport. He couldn't translocate away. He could only run. "You okay? I got you. I'm getting you out of here and it's going to be okay." Just as he rounded the corner of the stairwell and into the dark corridor below, something grabbed his leg and sent him crashing to the floor. He had the foresight to turn his body as he went down, striking his back against the stone but keeping Hunter safe against his chest. He cried out as stars filled his vision, air knocked all the way out of his chest. He kicked at it even as it tightened, and he heard his femur crack. He grit his teeth against it and stumbled back to his feet, putting his weight on his fractured leg and snarling against the pain as he forced himself forward despite it. Something shot through his abdomen and sent blood splattering across the cobblestone. He crashed back to the ground on his side, gasping for air as black spots burst across his vision. And then Hunter was torn from his arms. "No!" He shrieked through ragged lungs, grabbing weakly after him. Ropes of rotten flesh grabbed his wrists and slammed them back down against the floor. His chest began to rise and fall rapidly, aggravating his gut further. "Now, why did you have to go and do that?" Bellows asked with some amusement. He stepped forward to stand over him, holding a wailing Hunter in one arm. "Look at how small he is. He won't even fit into his uniform." "Give him back," Jasper snarled. "I'm not afraid of you." "Of course you are," Bellows dismissed. "You are terrified of me, because I have done everything in my power to make sure that you are." Jasper's breath began to rasp through his throat and whistle through his teeth as it sped up. No, give him back. You can't even use him. He's too young. You can grow another one. One that will be ready in 3 years. It will be ready sooner than Hunter ever will. You don't need him. No, but you want him, Bellows replied. And isn't that enough? No, Jasper said weakly. Please. He struggled against his bindings uselessly. He'd known Bellows was strong, but never that he was stronger than him. Please. We'll go away. I won't tell anyone anything. I'll leave the Isles. You'll never hear from me again. No. Bellows looked down at Hunter and tilted his chin up to look at him, cooing softly. Hello there, little one. Leave him alone, Jasper said brokenly. I've never asked you for anything. True, Bellows hummed. I'm enjoying the begging. Keep going. Get creative. Okay. His hands were sweating, shaking. His thoughts were racing. He had to come up with something. Soon. I'm sorry, Master. I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'll forget everything. I'll stay, and I'll be good. And why would you do that? Because Hunter is here, Jasper exclaimed. He began to pull at his right wrist as hard as he could. Because I'll stay to take care of him. I love him. I won't leave him. As long as he's here, I'll do whatever you want to make sure he's safe. Interesting, Bellows hummed. What is it exactly that turned you against me after all this time? Jasper took a few shallow breaths as he tried to think of a good lie. He failed. I went to the skull, searching for Titan's blood for you, he admitted. I found the graveyard. Bellows clicked his tongue and sighed, shaking his head. What a shame. You'd lasted so long. And I can last longer, he argued, still pulling at his wrist. You can keep me alive until Hunter is old enough to replace me, and then you can do whatever you want to me. You'd be trying to break him out every single day, Bellows mused. No, Jasper insisted. No, I'd never. I promise you, and I'd never break a promise. Bellows chuckled. You would. You promise me you'll never fail me again every time I hit you. And you do anyway. Jasper took a deep breath and then wrenched his right arm free, breaking every bone in his hand in the process. To his credit, Bellows had the decency to look startled before Jasper sat up high enough to grab his stupid cloak in his teeth and slam his head back, yanking the Emperor forward. Bellows fell, and the rope around his left wrist loosened enough that he could pull it free without breaking it. He spun over and landed on his knees, tearing the dagger from his boot. Bellows tightened his grip on Hunter with one arm, free hand jerking out in front of him to catch himself. Jasper raised the blade over his head and moved to bring it down. He froze. Bellows held Hunter in one arm, his other hand tilting his head back to expose his jugular. The little Grimwalker wailed hysterically as a razor-sharp spike pressed against his neck. Jasper didn't move. He didn't breathe. That's right, Bellows said slowly, smiling enough to show his teeth. We wouldn't want anything to happen to the little one now, would we? You won't kill him, said Jasper. You're going to kill me. You need him. Like you said, it would be fast to grow a new one. He's a baby, Jasper argued. You wouldn't kill a baby? Of course I would, said Bellows coolly, still smiling. I'll even name the next one Hunter, too. No big loss for me. Jasper's palms began to sweat, or perhaps that was just the blood leaking out of his broken hand. You're going to kill him either way, Jasper tried. It doesn't matter what I do. I may as well save my own life. I like bargaining, Bellows replied, almost as much as I like begging. I'm not negotiating with you, Jasper snarled. The blade pressed against Hunter's flesh, slicing through his upper neck and into his cheek. Blood flowed freely from the wound, and his shrieking took on a new timbre. "Stop!" Jasper cried in blossoming panic. "Stop! Stop! Okay, bargaining. I can bargain," he panted, thinking. Don't hurt him." "Why shouldn't I?" Bellows inquired. "Because I'll..." Jasper's voice wavered and then broke. "I'll give up. If you don't hurt him, I'll give up." "Well, I suppose I can keep him," Bellows hummed. "I certainly can't keep you." "Okay," Jasper said slowly. "Okay. If I give up, you'll let him live?" Bellows hummed, looking away in thought as he tapped Hunter's cheek with the razor-sharp edge of his spike. Why not?" "No!" Jasper snarled, trying to sound brave. "I need your word. Say it." "You have my word," Bellows purred, "that as long as he stays loyal, he gets to live." Jasper swallowed. It caught in his throat, and for a moment he thought he might be sick. He forced it down. "As long as he stays loyal." "Mm-hmm. But you're going to kill me." "Mm-hmm." "Right." Jasper swallowed again. His hand slipped against the handle of his dagger, and he fumbled to right them again. "I'll put the knife away. You'll kill me. And then you won't hurt Hunter." "Sounds good to me." "Can I..." Jasper took a sharp, shuddering breath. "Can I make one more request?" "Maybe." The knife point rested against Hunter's face. "Don't tell him," Jasper said, trying not to sound like he was begging. "Don't tell him what?" "Anything," Jasper clarified. "Don't tell him what he is." He swallowed a final time. "Don't tell him that he's a Grimwalker." "An interesting proposal." Bellows gave him a wave to get off of him, and Jasper hung his head, looking at the floor. He shuffled backwards on his broken leg, wincing as more blood seeped from his belly. He dropped his arms to his sides and let the knife fall to the floor as he sat back on his ankles. Bellows rose to his feet, still cradling Hunter in one arm. Not like a son. Like a dog. "He's a baby," Jasper mumbled. "He won't remember this. He doesn't know anything. Just tell him. Tell him that he's your long-lost nephew or something. Tell him that he's an orphan. Just don't tell him that he doesn't have feelings." His eyes watered, but he kept them on the floor. "Tell him that Tell him what you told me. He's special. The Titan needs him." He stared downwards and just let the tears come. "If you tell him that, he'll be loyal. Like I was." Bellows hummed, visibly intrigued. "And we would want him to be loyal, wouldn't we, Jasper?" Jasper stared at the ground. "Because if his loyalty wavers, I'll have to kill him." "Right," Jasper whispered. "Because you'll have to kill him." "I'm willing to agree to that," Bellows said coolly. "But I'll need something else in exchange." Jasper shivered. "What?" "I'd like you to kill yourself." Jasper froze. He looked up. "What?" "I'd like you to kill yourself," Bellows repeated. "Take that blade and slit your throat. Or your wrists if you'd rather, but I think your throat would be quicker. Less painful." Jasper looked up incomprehensibly at the man who made him, raised him, trained him, fed and clothed him. The man he had spent his entire life serving, defending, worshipping, loving. Why? Bellows smiled, the same smile that he always smiled. Soft, gentle, fond. "Because I'd like to see if you can," he replied. Jasper stared at him. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. He looked down at Hunter, who was still sobbing. Soft little face streaked with tears and blood. Cheek opened up like a torn gambeson. Skin still smeared with the dirt he'd been born in. An innocent little baby. An innocent little baby that Jasper had grown. His innocent little baby. "Okay," he agreed in a weak voice, as his Galderstone heart cracked within his chest. Jasper picked up the knife back up from the floor. He gripped it weakly in his broken hand. His glove glowed pale blue and the pain faded away. He glanced up at the Emperor's glowing staff with miserable resignation, and then back down at the dagger. He held it in both hands, forcing them to steady. Hunter was going to be okay. Darius would be there. "I love you," he whimpered in a tiny voice, eyes squeezed shut and leaking. Who he was talking to? He wasn't sure. Hunter? Darius? Himself? With one more deep, steadying breath, he raised the blade and then brought it down to finish the job of breaking his broken heart. This is Ash Animus. Thank you for listening to Jabberwocky, written by Drakenator, a fanfiction based on the Owl House. We hope you enjoyed this production, and we'll see you all in the next one. See the link in the description for this work and the works inspired.